morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this great morning. We're joined by over 20 members of the Oireachtas, including Ministers Patrick O'Donovan and Niall Collins, Oireachtas Committee Chairs Brian Ledden and Stephen Matthews, representatives from Clare, Limerick City and County, and also councillors. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. As well as MEPs Sean Kelly, Deirdre Clune, and Barry Andrews. Distinguished guests, yourselves joining me, finally representatives of the national and local media in Clare. And also councillors. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Sean Murphy, Public Affairs Manager at ESB, and I'll be acting as MC for today's event. The running order will feature approximately 25 minutes of briefings, 25 minutes of press Q&As, and 25 minutes of stakeholder questions. The speeches will be led by ESB Chief Executive Pat O'Doherty, colleagues from ESB Generation and Trading who will brief you on ESB's contribution to Ireland's decarbonisation challenge, that is, Green Atlantic at Moneypoint. Executive Director for Generation and Trading, Jim Dollard, and Jim will then be joined by Pádraig O'Hickey, Head of Strategy, Generation and Trading for a media Q&A. That'll take around about 25 minutes. So, without further ado, I'd like to please introduce Pat O'Doherty, Chief Executive of ESB. And Jim will then be joined by Pádraig O'Hickey, Head of Strategy, Generation and Trading.
Good morning, everybody. First and foremost, I would like to note that today's announcement.
Please introduce Pat O'Doherty, Chief Executive of ESB.
Good morning. First and foremost, I want to note that today's announcement is really all about Moneypoint, a location of great importance and significance to the people of West Clare. In other circumstances, I would be making this announcement from there, but as that's not possible due to COVID restrictions, I would like to extend a particularly warm welcome to the people from West Clare and the surrounding areas who are with us virtually today. But now I'd like to share with you our new ambitions for Moneypoint and how it can play a role in the fight against climate change. We are experiencing the effects of climate change in real time. Increasingly, intense storms, rising sea levels, and more frequent wildfires are just some of the profound impacts that we are having on this planet. This is the defining challenge of our generation. The Irish government has set ambitious targets to meet this challenge, to reduce carbon emissions by half by the end of this decade and to achieve net zero carbon by 2050. We have to take carbon out of the Irish economy, and to do that, we need to decarbonise the energy system. ESB can and will play a major role in achieving this. This is not the first time that ESB has embarked on an ambitious and visionary plan to transform Ireland's energy landscape. Almost 100 years ago, the development of the Shannon scheme at Ardnacrusha became a catalyst for Ireland's social, economic and industrial development. At the time, Ardnacrusha was the largest hydroelectric scheme in the world, eventually superseded by the Hoover Dam. It was engineering on a grand scale, and it set the scene for many other equally bold and ambitious projects delivered by ESB for the good of the nation. Today, as ESB continues to work for a brighter future for the communities and for the customers that we serve, we are sharing our vision for a reimagined Moneypoint, one that will fundamentally change the way we live, how we plug in, how we move about, how we make things, and how we heat and cool our spaces. We are setting out plans for a multi-billion investment programme in West Clare, a programme that will not only contribute significantly to meeting Ireland's climate targets, but has the potential to transform our economy. ESB is investing across a range of renewable technologies in Ireland. This includes 7 offshore wind projects under development, 2 off the Louth coast with our partner Park Wind, and a further 5 projects in partnership with Equinor. These are world-class partners who are established leaders in the offshore wind industry. Emma Delaney, Environmental Project Manager at ESB, will join us now to explain how we will literally catch the wind.
Thank you, Pat. Energy demand in Ireland is growing. By the end of the decade, we will need to have increased electricity production by 33%. And not only will we need to produce more electricity, but if we are to hit our carbon targets, this electricity will need to be green. Fortunately, Ireland has the natural resources to make a net zero carbon Ireland a reality. Our Atlantic coast boasts the highest average wind speeds in Europe, making it one of the best places in the world to capture wind energy. The Atlantic, when harnessed, can produce 30,000 megawatts of electricity. This is enough power to meet Ireland's current demand 4.5 times over. Clean, abundant energy that can decarbonise our society and have a profound impact on our economy. So why isn't the Atlantic teeming with turbines? Well, typically, offshore wind turbines are fixed to the seabed. This means you need shallow water, and the Atlantic is deep. The logical solution is to borrow technology from the oil and gas industry and build floating platforms. In fact, this is already happening in other parts of the world, and the technology is breaking records. High Wind in Scotland, the world's first floating wind farm, is already the best performing wind farm in the UK. The technology is proven and will enable us to unlock the power of the Atlantic. And we are ready to go now. We've partnered with Equinor, the very same company that built Scotland's record-breaking wind farm. Together, we are going to build 2 of the largest floating offshore wind farms in Europe off the Clare coast. These wind farms will generate 1,400 megawatts, enough electricity to power over 84% of the homes in Ireland. But there's more to this story. Because the wind is variable, sometimes we produce more electricity than we need, and sometimes less. Aidan McAleer, Hydrogen Manager at ESB, will explain how we plan to deal with this.
Thanks, Emma. So what does happen when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? And how are we going to fully decarbonize heavy transport, industry, and power generation? We need to do something new, something different if we are going to get to net zero. And storage is the missing ingredient in the energy sector, in the decarbonization story. We need to catch the wind and then store this energy. And storing renewable energy as hydrogen will be the game changer. So we can use our offshore wind energy to make this green, renewable hydrogen. And this hydrogen is a carbon-free gas that can be safely stored and then used as a replacement fuel for heavy transport, industry, and power generation. Transport is 20% of our carbon problem. Or heavy transport is powered by oil, generating carbon and other emissions. But green Atlantic hydrogen is the viable alternative, a clean green fuel for the future. Imagine our towns and cities with zero carbon, zero emissions vehicles. And industries in Ireland are now not only competing on price, but also on their carbon footprint. Green hydrogen is required to decarbonize a wide range of these industries. Industries such as pharmaceutical, cement production, and many others. And even for our own industry, power generation and energy storage. We can store this green hydrogen instead of fossil fuels to make electricity when the wind doesn't blow. So green hydrogen makes all this possible. And as we deliver our offshore wind farms, we can build the electrolyzer infrastructure to produce and store this hydrogen. So the key to solving these challenges is ESB Green Atlantic at Moneypoint. So on your greedy, strategy analysts can elaborate on our plans for Moneypoint. Anya?
Thanks, Aidan. Floating offshore wind and hydrogen are exciting new technologies. And with new technology comes a great opportunity. We see this as the beginning of a whole new industry here in Ireland, and we believe that Moneypoint and the Shannon Estuary will be at the heart of this industry. Moneypoint has been a great servant to the Irish people. It was built to provide a secure supply of electricity for our nation, and has done so for 40 years. But it's time for a new chapter, and we intend on transforming Moneypoint into Ireland's premier renewable energy hub. Located in the Shannon Estuary, its proximity to the planned wind farms is an obvious advantage. But Moneypoint is also home to one of the deepest water ports and channels in the whole of Western Europe. The huge land bank at Moneypoint also provides ample space for the assembly and manufacture of these giant floating structures these wind farms are going to require. Moneypoint will be a bustling hive of activity, ideally placed to become the focal point of the wind energy industry and hydrogen production and distribution. A hub at Moneypoint will enable us to both manufacture and construct these wind farms right here in Ireland. The potential economic and development benefits of the hub are very significant. It would unlock much wider supply chain benefits and seed many supporting industries across the entire West Coast region. Access to these capabilities would allow Irish companies to more than double the benefits they could capture from the billions set to be invested in the Irish offshore sector over the coming decades. An entire new industry for Ireland that will serve wind farms right here in Ireland and across Europe. I now give you Jim Dollard, Executive Director of Generation Trading, who will now talk and bring you through our plans.
Thanks, Anya. So that's our vision, but this is not on some far off distant horizon. Green Atlantic has already started. Building on the onshore wind farm already on site in Moneypoint, there are 4 components to this program. The first step is next month. We will break ground on a 50 million synchronous compensator. It will be the largest of its kind in the world. It will provide electrical services to the grid, and a key purpose of the plant is to facilitate more renewables on the system. We've also started work on our first floating wind farm with our partners Equinor. Provided all goes according to plan, the first phase of that project can be delivered by 2028, with the second phase to follow shortly after that. As part of the third component of this blueprint, ESB will develop the infrastructure to manufacture and assemble the foundations for the wind farm on site in Moneypoint. This will ultimately develop a capability that can be utilized for other offshore wind farms on the West Coast. Finally, following on from our offshore wind delivery and aligning with market demand, ESB will develop a hydrogen production and storage hub on the site. Green Atlantic can play a significant role in transforming Ireland into a thriving focal point for offshore wind, hydrogen, and other renewable technologies. We're now going to play a short video that will give you a sense of what this means for our economy, our society, and our country. Play a short video that will give you a sense of what this means for our economy, our society, and our country.
First of all,
Play
ESB
a short video
Atlantic
that will
project
give you a
is
sense of
really
what
important
this means for our economy, our society, and our
floating
country.
offshore wind, which will make better use of this huge resource.
Play a
ESB
short video
Atlantic
that will
project
give you a
is
sense
really
of what this
important
means for our
in
economy,
terms
our
of
society,
our
and
West
country.
Coast. They're investing in technology to make renewables fit into a system. And we need to deploy 70% of new renewable electricity by 2030. So that needs technical innovation, and that's going to happen at Moneypoint. Also, turning some of that offshore electricity, which you can't use, into hydrogen, which can be then used for a range of different purposes. That is important and new. So there are a lot of reasons why this project is special.
A lot of what is going to be learned from this project will have transferability across Ireland and internationally. I think the other really exciting thing is the high value jobs that will be created, particularly for the engineering sector. But beyond electricity generation, green hydrogen will enable Ireland to decarbonise some of those hard to abate sectors that are really causing a lot of difficulties, such as transport, industrial processing, and activities like this will help to reduce carbon, but also take other pollutants out of the atmosphere.
We work a lot with the Department of Energy's Advanced Research Program, RPE. They have been a collaborator with us on a lot of projects, including a hydrogen tank for vehicles and solar tracking for grid energy. There is an enormous need in the future for the ability to make energy that is usable whenever you need it. If you are a country that can produce a lot of hydrogen and you know how to get that hydrogen to the people who need to use it, that's going to be an incredible advantage in the future. I'm excited about ESB Green Atlantic because it is a huge step forward in making the commitments and the developments of the technology that we will need in the future.
Hydrogen will play a critical role in global decarbonisation, particularly because internationally now we've agreed to more ambitious emission cuts compared to previously. We have a vast offshore wind energy resource that we want to harness and make use of in Ireland. And green hydrogen gives us the opportunity to do that. It's a way of, if you like, storing the renewable energy coming from wind and solar energy, and allows us to use that energy perhaps when we need it, so even when the wind isn't blowing.
Climate change is the defining challenge of our generation, and Ireland needs to step up to the plate. The government have set out an ambition of us being net carbon neutral by 2050, and I'm so inspired to see ESB taking such a bold vision, making such a big investment to make that a reality. Big global problems need to be met with big, innovative solutions, and this is epic levels of engineering and innovation from ESB. It's the first floating offshore wind farm in the Atlantic, and it'll put Ireland at the forefront of sustainable energy generation. Large-scale programs like this create challenges. We have to build giant offshore floating platforms. We need software to manage all of this. And that creates an opportunity for entrepreneurs, for innovators. The Shannon Estuary is going to become a hotbed of innovation in the offshore wind arena. Offshore floating platforms. We need software to manage all of this. And that creates an opportunity.
As a nation, our targets could not be clearer. We are committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. Through the climate bill, the government has challenged us all to do better, and ESB is stepping up. We are harnessing our knowledge, our expertise, and our resources to take action and leadership in Ireland's transition to a low-carbon future. The scale of the plan we've outlined today is matched only by the scale of the challenge we face. But with this challenge comes opportunity. Today, we import 80% of our energy requirements in the form of coal, oil, and gas. By harnessing the clean, natural energy of the Atlantic, we have the potential to turn this figure on its head and become a net exporter of energy. This technology is not only transformative for our environment, it will also create new economic opportunities for Ireland. ESB has already invested billions in clean energy infrastructure, and we will continue to do so over the coming decades at Moneypoint and elsewhere. These are investments in our environment and in our future. Secure, clean, abundant energy will fuel our economy, create new jobs, and attract foreign investment. We believe that Ireland can and will become a leader in the fight against climate change. An example to the world of how to create a clean, renewable, and a sustainable future. This is the time to act. The technology is available, and we have the capabilities and the partners to make this a reality. Green Atlantic at Moneypoint reflects the scale of our ambition and our commitment to creating a cleaner, a brighter, and a more sustainable future for all. I will now invite Sean back to moderate the Q&A.
Thanks very much to all the speakers. Just before I call up Jim Dollard and Pádraig Ó Hické, Head of Strategy with ESB Generation Trading, just to note that MEPs Sean Kelly, Barry Andrews and Deirdre Clune join us online. Also the Cathaoirleach of Clare County Council, Mary Howard, is a most welcome addition also. So with your permission, we'll take a moment. The screens may flicker as we adjust and get the Q&A ready. This will take about 25 to 30 minutes. And after that, if any member of the media doesn't get a question answered, we'll be very happy to answer that through our press office subsequently this afternoon or over the coming days. So if I call on Pádraig and Jim to join us now, please.
Thanks, Sean.
So we'll start the questions in the next moment. I'm just letting the screens Q&As appear on screen here right now. If you give it one moment, please. Just give it one moment to get set up, please, ladies and gentlemen. While we're waiting, I might just start a question for where we're starting. Jim, just a first question that came in bilaterally from a stakeholder was, how many jobs do you see coming on stream in this initiative over the coming years?
Thanks, Sean. We see, as we said in our press statement, we see significant jobs being invested as part of this project at Green Atlantic. If you take the offshore wind farm itself, we believe of the order of 600 jobs will be created around the construction of the wind farm. There will, of course, be not just construction jobs related to this whole project. There will be jobs in terms of servicing and maintaining the whole facility and beyond over time.
Okay, and can we also get a definition of what a sink compensator is, gentlemen? I'm waiting for the QAs to come through in the present time.
I might grab that one. At the moment, we use large fossil fuel generators to stabilize the system. And so although they enable renewable penetration, that they also burn fossil fuels. And a synchronous compensator allows us to do those services without using any fossil fuel. So it's an essential way of greening the electricity system.
Okay. And I would ask the members of the media if you could actually raise your hand electronically. I'll call you out for your questions. And you're on mute right now, please. Kevin O'Sullivan, I see you're online. I'm not sure if you have a question to ask. I don't see a hand raised up for you there. Can you ask a question, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
I can perfectly, thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's obviously a very exciting development, but how do you see the West Coast developing, not just with your wind farm, but over the next 20 years or so, in terms of the scale of individual wind farms, and also to what extent will they be involved in hydrogen production?
Thanks, Kevin. Well, I suppose we know that at least 30,000 megawatts of resources is off the West Coast. I've seen numbers higher than that, but at least 30,000 megawatts. That's a huge resource. You know, our wind farm is 1,400 megawatts over 2 phases. So you're looking at a significant number of wind farms off the Atlantic coast over that period of time, the middle of this decade and beyond. It will in itself, I suppose, spawn other industries, support industries. We ourselves have talked about the hub in Moneypoint around constructing and assembling the foundations for that, and the whole support services industry, we believe, for the scale of 30,000 megawatts will be required to service that scale of investment.
Thank you. I see a number of hands raised right now, but Thomas Hubert from the Currency, if you want to ask a question there, please. And Kevin, if you're finished, if you have another question, I'll happily pass that on again, but Thomas has his hand raised.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm curious about the turbine manufacturing and assembly project. Are you considering ESB and Equinor going into that business themselves, or offering infrastructure for other companies to come in and work in Moneypoint? And subsequent question would be, any more figures you can give us? I saw the press release, 50 million euro mentioned for the compensator, but beyond that, in any of the various projects you mentioned, any figures you could give us on the investment required? Thanks.
I'll take the first one of those, if that's okay, Jim. The proposal that we actually have is to do construction of the foundations, the floating foundations, and assembly of the floating turbines at Moneypoint, and then to have a service hub. We don't envisage that we would be, a primary turbine manufacturer, and we do envisage that through our project we will create an infrastructure that will be available for other developers along the West Coast, and that it would be, I suppose, if I could borrow an Aberdeen, it would be to the West Coast Wind what Aberdeen is to, say, to North Sea Oil. In terms of
in terms of the cost of the wind farm, Thomas, the cost of renewable technology is falling rapidly and has done so in the last decade, and we would expect over the next decade will continue to fall, which are certainly talking about multi-billion euro investment for the wind farm itself, not alone the hydrogen and all the other aspects of the plan we've set out, multiple billions in terms of the project.
I do see a number of questions coming in from stakeholders, including Timmy Dooley, Michael McNamara, and Senator Paul Gavin, but I'll come to them during the stakeholder section at the end of this press office press query, if that's okay. Owen Ryan from the Clare Champion is on. Owen, if you could turn your camera on and make sure you're not in mute mode, that would be great, please.
Yeah, you can see and hear me there now. This is suppose you hope to be kind of up and running a bit by 2028 or so, I think. But what's going to happen between 2025 and 2028 at Moneypoint?
Well, thanks, Owen. Firstly, just to say, as in from next month, we'll be investing in that site. There's very significant investment going to kick off, as Pádraig outlined, the synchronous compensator. So that's a fairly 50 million investment kicking off, and we would hope that that will be in operation next year. So that's the first step. The consenting on the wind farm has already started, as we've set out. We hope that the first phase, as I said, will be ready by 2028, and the next phase beyond that. The existing plant will continue to operate out to 2025. We've said that on coal, and after that, we would see a role for the existing facility in backup mode on the system, not in day-to-day production, but on backup mode in the case of emergencies.
Okay. And can I ask, in the longer term, do you see, will there be additional employment in Moneypoint? Will there be more jobs there than there is now, do you think, in the long term?
Well, I think what we've said is we believe there's a significant number of jobs going to be announced. We've said 600 jobs is typical for in the construction of a wind farm. And we believe as we roll out this blueprint over the next decade, that it will create significant volumes of jobs as we develop our plans. So yes, very significant.
But after the construction phases was what I really mean.
Yeah, well, we've said the servicing and maintenancing of the actual whole, the whole grounds, if you like, the actual whole hub will require service and maintenance roles. And we would see a significant number of roles based there as we develop it out.
But would you expect that to be more than what you have at the moment?
Well, that's difficult to say. I would expect so, but that will evolve over time.
With your permission, we might move on. Owen, I see Caroline O'Doherty there from the Independent. Caroline, if you want to raise a question, please, if you could turn your camera on and make sure you're not muted, please.
Good morning. I do have a question. Looking at the computer generated images that you've done, it looks like the entire existing infrastructure is leveled, it's gone, chimneys, turbines, everything. Will the entire site be cleared for all this development?
Caroline, maybe I'll field that one. I think you're reaching the limitations of what we can prepare in computer generated graphics within a short period of time. So there is no doubt at some point in time, as we build out the renewable infrastructure, a coal infrastructure will not be required. It will be required in the short term, and
the iconic chimneys, will they come down?
Yes, in time, yes. Because the whole site has been repurposed. What we intend to do on that site is very, very significant. So the whole site is going to be repurposed, effectively starting from next month.
Can I be bold and ask one more question then? I know that there's a substantial ash storage facility. What do you do with that in the long run? I know there's been some of it's been sold, but.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. We're looking at that. We have been looking at that for some time. We would see we're investigating the possibility of using that ash as part of the concrete structures for the offshore wind farm. That's something we're looking at carefully. And if not, we look at it in other uses. It's something we have been closely examining.
Conscious of time, so thank you very much for that, Caroline. Kevin O'Sullivan, I know your camera's off. I got the sense you had another question there. If you don't have it, that's fine. We'll move on, but I didn't want to cut you off there. If you could make sure your camera's on and you're not muted if you do have a follow-up question.
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. I'm conscious that there are a number of press representatives here in what is the press Q&A element, but I don't see any more hands raised for the press. Caroline, I think you have one more question there. Caroline O'Doherty, turn on your camera, please, and make sure you're not muted. Or maybe that hand up was from the previous round of questions. So in the absence of any further questions, gentlemen, we might move to the stakeholder questions, of which there are quite a few from political representatives and the like. So with your permission, we might take a moment just to segue to that. It'll take about 2 minutes, and we shall get we'll go straight into the stakeholder QAs then, if that's okay. So thank you for your time, members of the press. Okay. Okay, so we're now at the stakeholder questions, and I do appreciate the stakeholders. Many of you haven't journeyed a long way, but you're online a long way to this meeting. So thank you for your time. Senator Timmy Dooley from Clare, I gather, had a question there. Senator, if you want to ask your question, please. Oh, excuse me, I'm reading out the questions. I'm very sorry, I got that wrong. I'll go with Deputy Violet Ann Wynne first. Violet Ann Wynne is asking, what will happen to the workforce currently in Moneypoint from 2025 to 2028? Will there be opportunities for local people in West Clare as long-term employment opportunities?
Look, we're intent, as we said, we laid out, we're intent on operating the plant to 2025 and beyond. It's properly staffed at the moment. We're always open for further, if we need further resources for that plant, we will take them on. And beyond that, as we said, in terms of Green Atlantic, there will be significant opportunities over the next decade.
Thank you for that. Cathal Crowe, Deputy Cathal Crowe from Clare has asked, would like to ask, he hasn't written his question yet. We might try and get him on in due course. Frank McGovern, can you outline? Hello, yes?
Sorry,
Deputy
Cathal Crowe here. Sorry,
Yeah,
I've just been unmuted here. Two very quick questions.
We lost you there again, Cathal. If you just start that again, please. You're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry, my sincere apologies. Yes, I've just two quick questions. Will the existing workforce be retained for now and retrained down the road? And also, if I can ask, what does the supporting infrastructure of roads, the nearby towns, is that adequate or is more required in terms of meeting the needs of this major project? And how will they benefit from it, the nearby towns and settlements? Thank you.
So the existing staff will be retained. Existing staff are really important for us. You know, the plant is on load at the moment. So the staff will be retained right out over for the life of the station and beyond. We will, as always, our own staff will be considered strongly for any opportunities that arise in that site. That will always be our priority. And we've done that in all our locations across the board. Your second question, Deputy?
Just, is the supporting infrastructure in West Clare adequate for this? And how will the nearby towns and settlements benefit from this going forward?
Well, the support infrastructure will be one of the things when we were looking for planning permission for the various aspects of this. We'll be looking very closely at our environmental assessments, our engineering assessments. We'll look very closely at that. That site,
I mean, roads, etc. Access to the site.
That will be part of the assessment. But the site was purposed specifically for large-scale generation. It has seen heavy transport coming in and out of that over the years. But we will look again, given the demands, the unique demands of our hub, what is required in terms of local infrastructure, and we'll be engaging with communities on that appropriately.
Senator Timmy Dooley to come on screen now with a question, if that's okay, Senator.
Yeah, not sure if you can hear me there.
We can.
We can, yeah.
Okay, very good. Yeah, well, it's similar to a number of others. First of all, I'm really concerned about that gap between 2025 and 2027. And I think you did refer to the fact that you hope to act in a backup capacity. It would be important that we get some clarity on that because there is some concern amongst the current workforce. So you might just clarify that for us, how that's going to play out. Just on the hydrogen side of things, I think that's really the most exciting, or one of the most exciting aspects, because whilst there seems to be some concerns about the future employment prospects from just the wind farm, you might talk a little bit more about the potential employment opportunities in the production of hydrogen, and where you see that based on the current vision for the use of hydrogen over the years ahead. Thank you.
I'm happy to pick up on that, Jim. Timmy, you might appreciate that we are looking at the start of the embryos of a hydrogen industry, and what we see is that hydrogen can decarbonize, or will decarbonize, I suppose, parts of the energy system. It's broader than the electricity system, parts of the energy system that other areas can't reach, such as how do you decarbonize shipping? How do you decarbonize heavy trucks? How do you actually run electricity when it's not windy? You know, what's the stored energy? At the moment, that stored energy is natural gas, but that is a fossil fuel. So if you want to decarbonize, so we actually envisage quite a substantial hydrogen production and storage infrastructure at Moneypoint, and there will be jobs associated with that. And then from that, as you evolve towards 2050, think of all of the areas where we're currently burning carbon that you need. So how all of the tertiary employment, how do we get that to trucks? How is that distributed? They're the sort of jobs and employment that we envisage and see coming from that.
I think that's hugely important, and I also think the issue that you've raised about the potential for the greater use of your facilities at the hub that you propose to develop there by other wind energy operators who are looking to the Atlantic to
Senator, I'm
generate
conscious.
more electricity.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time. There's other people to speak.
Okay,
If that's okay with
thanks.
you. So I'll go
Fire
to Senator Paul Gavin was online with a question there from Limerick, and also Minister Niall Collins. So depending who is available there to take the question, we might go to one or other, please. So, Senator, are you there? While we're waiting, I'll just read out a question or a comment from Bruno Gallagher from UCC. Professor Bruno Gallagher is asking, how much CO2 emissions reduction do you envisage we'll achieve over what time frame, please?
From this initiative in its own, we envisage about 1.8 million tonnes per annum. And that's post 2030, when it actually gets into full operation.
Very good. Okay, I see Minister Niall Collins online there. So, Minister, if you can make sure you're unmuted, we can take your question, please.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks to the guys for the presentation and very ambitious and impressive plans. Can I just ask, from the Limerick Kerry side of the estuary, what is the impact, if any, on the operation of the Tarbert facility at Moneypoint? Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
The Tarbert facility?
Tarbert facility, yeah. SS?
Yeah, we don't own the Tarbert facility. We do have people in Moneypoint, and so lots of people currently employed by us in Moneypoint actually travel across that ferry and are living in West Limerick and North Kerry, and we view the whole area just as a single hinterland.
We had a query in about Shannon Foyne's Port as well, and the opportunity to work together on that. If you wanted, maybe
Shannon Foyne's Port have brought forward some really good and clever proposals about utilizing the port infrastructure and their port infrastructure to support the wind industry. We think that that's very welcome, and we think, in terms of, it would be interesting to see how we can collaborate together in order to springboard the infrastructure in the region, to build economic activity and employment.
Okay. Minister, I'm afraid we've got your question, but we can't hear you right now. But I hope that's answered the key question you asked there, if that's okay with you. So with your permission, we might go to Senator Paul Gavin from Limerick there, please. Senator, if you can come on stream there.
Thanks very much. Very exciting announcement this morning. Just my simple question is, maybe you could just outline or reassure us in terms of the ownership structure of this new venture. We'd want to make sure that something as exciting as this remains 100% state-owned.
Well, Green Atlantic, the hub, the site that is Moneypoint, is 100% owned by ESB. So that's important. There's a range of technologies that are going to be deployed on the site itself. That's 100% owned by ESB, a state-owned company. In terms of the offshore wind farm, as is the case with all offshore wind farms, you have to partner, given the scale of the investments involved. Every offshore wind farm is typically partnered. So we're partnered with Equinor, another state entity in another jurisdiction. So that will be the nature of the ownership, but a huge state involvement.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Deputy Michael McNamara, if that's okay. Deputy McNamara, if you can make sure you're unmuted, please.
Two questions. What is the split with regard to the Equinor in the ownership of the floating turbines? So what will be the percentage ownership? And secondly, is there any prospect of the blades? You said the turbines wouldn't be manufactured, they would be imported and assembled at Moneypoint. Will the blades be imported as well, or is there a possibility of having them manufactured locally?
The relationship with Equinor is a 50-50 relationship. So that's the answer to that. In terms of the blade manufacturing, at this point, I mean, we're looking decades on here. This is basically concentrating a hub for generations to come. So at this stage, at the early phase, we would see that the blades would come from elsewhere. But down the road, I suppose relating to the earlier question, we see the Shannon Estuary being a focal point for offshore wind all across the Atlantic coast. So it's not just about Clare itself, it'll be about Limerick, Kerry, etc., servicing the whole of the Atlantic. So we see that as very exciting. But I would say initially the blades will come from off the island. But over time, as we build the capability and the related industries, who's to say that that can't happen as it has in other jurisdictions?
I might add to that, we don't see ourselves becoming a manufacturer of blades. You know, that's not our space. One of the proposals that Shannon Point Port had is to make portions of their site available to people who do that, to come in and manufacture in the locality to service the West Coast and to serve and beyond. Because there's a deep port there, as these get transported, it's a good location.
We have a number of other questions, and
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm conscious that Deputy Wynne, I asked a question for her. If she has another question, we'll happily process that for her. But Senator Roisin Garvey and Cathaoirleach Mary Howard of Clare County Council had questions to ask. So if you could make yourselves available, unmute your mics and turn on the camera, please. I think the Senator is available first. I see her waving. So if she could go there first, please.
Hi, thank you very much. Historic day for Ireland and Clare, so well done. I suppose we could have done with starting it 30 years ago, but like planting a tree, the best time to do it is now if we didn't do it 30 years ago. So I slept better last night in hope and faith for our country, and hopefully we become net exporters. Just one question, because we have till 2028. I was thinking about young people and keeping them in the area around the local communities and linking them up. Have you been engaging with the University of Limerick and LIT? And we have our own branch of LIT now in Ennis as well, which is going to become a university soon at Athlone. Are you going to be working with them to make sure they have the job? I know they have some courses in energy, engineering and other things like that, but it would be great if we really got them on board with training local people and young people and older people to upskill and give them the skills we need so they can be employed.
But as Brian O'Callagher, who was actually asked a question earlier, might confirm, our team, in particular Anya, who you met earlier, is one of the people within that team, are in constant contact with the university sector in terms of technology development in innovation and renewable. I'm a Limerick graduate myself, and we do work with Limerick, and we'd be very happy to work with Limerick in terms of the technology learning, the innovation learning, and the economic impact that this can have for the university and for the broader region. Absolutely.
I suppose specifically give the courses, to give them the courses that will be needed, to give them the training they'll need. That's great. Thanks.
Okay, just before we go to the Cathaoirleach, I'm just conscious there's one press query outstanding from Pádraig McMahon. We might come to you in a while, Pádraig, if that's okay with you, but I think it's Mary Howard, the Cathaoirleach for Clare County Council now. And then I'm also conscious that Deputy Joe Carey and a number of councillors have a few questions. We'll get to them in due course, if that's okay. So Cathaoirleach Howard, please. If you could make sure you're unmuted and your camera turned on, please, if that's okay, Cathaoirleach. Okay, we might try and come back to her in a minute. So then, if we could go to Deputy Joe.
I'm having.
Oh, there, yeah. I hear you. I hear you there, Cathaoirleach. If you want to.
Yeah,
speak.
The camera doesn't seem to want to work for me today. But anyway, first of all, thank you for. It's been a really a fascinating minute. Here we go. I think. We
can hear you. Yeah, great. You're on.
Perfect. Okay, it's been a really interesting presentation and very welcome news for County Clare. And delighted to be here with you this morning. I'm not tech, so I just have a couple of questions for you. The first one is, how do we get the electricity onto the shore at Moneypoint? And then who will control the offshore grid?
Can I take that, Barry?
I'd certainly take the first one of those. There'll be cables from the offshore wind farm, probably multiple cables just for security, that will land back in the Moneypoint site. The offshore grid, I think, is a debate that's ongoing with government, and I can't answer that for now.
Okay, we might move then, with your permission, Cathaoirleach, and thank you for your time, to Deputy Joe Carey from Clare, please, Deputy.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for a very good presentation. It's very welcome news for County Clare, for the Midwest region, for the entire country. These ambitious plans will unlock the undoubted potential that's there. Just if you could take me through the time frame again, from start to when this project will really be ramped up, and just in terms of the opportunity in relation to the manufacture and the use of the Shannon estuary in the manufacture of components that will play a part in this. Could you expand more on that? Thanks.
So in terms of the timetable, actually, I'll take you back 3 years. If you're familiar with the site, we've built an onshore wind farm in 2017 on the site. So actually the repurposing of that site started in 2017. So that was, if you like, phase 0, we'll call it phase 0. Phase 1 is the synchronous compensator. And that's, we hope to announce in the next week or so, the construction of that on site. So that will start immediately. Within the next month, we should see activity on the site to construct, and we hope that it will be concluded by next year and in operations. Really, really exciting thing for us. The third piece will be the offshore wind farm. That development has already started. We're looking at, so the development of a wind farm typically takes 8 to 10 years of that order of scale in terms of the consenting that's required, the engagement on the ground, the environmental licenses, the planning permissions, the grid connections. All of that is a very structured piece of work. And that work has already started. We've started that in the last year, and that will progress, as I said, to 2028. The wind farm will be built in 2 phases. We believe phase 1 can be in operation by 2028. And the second phase, which is a bigger phase, would be available just early into the next decade. So that's the time frame for that. I think in parallel, as that moves forward, then probably the middle of this decade, we will be ramping up. Indeed, we've already done feasibility studies on the site, but how we would purpose the site, and you've seen some images, they are crude images at the moment, images about how we'd repurpose the site in terms of the construction of the foundations, big concrete foundations, and the assembly of turbines. These are giant structures. So the assembly of them for that wind farm and other wind farms is quite an undertaking before they're floated out for operation. So we'll develop that capability towards the middle of the decade in parallel with the wind farm. As the wind farm is developing, we'll develop it in parallel. And the final piece of the puzzle is hydrogen. And, you know, hydrogen is an emerging technology. The EU has set it out as being critical for climate zero, for zero emissions by 2050. It has identified green hydrogen as essential in that road. And over this decade, we will be rolling out kind of our plans in terms of specifically how, at the start of the next decade, a hydrogen facility will be on that site. So that work has started. You heard from Aidan, who's our hydrogen manager earlier, talking about how we will develop hydrogen. So it's exciting times.
I'm conscious that there's a member of the press, Pádraig McMahon from the Clare Echo. And Pádraig, if you're there to ask the question, we can ask it now for you. If you turn on your camera and turn off your or open your mic, please.
Thanks, Sean. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes, indeed. Thank you.
Okay. So I was just wondering, were other sites other than Moneypoint considered for such a development by ESB?
Well, I suppose we're looking at, as I said earlier, a number of sites around the country in terms of the development of offshore wind. Indeed, if you look at the broader renewables, but offshore, onshore, solar, batteries, we're working on multiple sites right across the country. Moneypoint is a specifically designed, purpose-built site for energy. 40 years ago, it was built on purpose for energy infrastructure. It has a deep water port. It has huge advantages in terms of the potential of 30,000 megawatts off the West Coast. So it's ideally and uniquely placed. So it's our particular focus now. But it is true to say, there are other locations which we will, develop in time, offshore wind farms, and we will then explore how we can exploit them in a similar fashion over the next decade.
And Jim, have the existing workforce at Moneypoint, have they been informed of ESB's plans to possibly retain them in use through the storage hub, or will they be hearing about it first when they maybe read it in the Clare Echo or somewhere else?
No, they won't, is the answer. We've engaged intensively with our staff over the last number of years in our plans. There'll be no surprises for the staff today. Our chief executive was on a call with all of the staff in Moneypoint only a couple of weeks ago, and he was very open about talking about our plans and our vision for all aspects of the site.
That's perfect, Sean. Thanks for letting me in.
No problem at all. Councillor Johnny Ryan had a question. Johnny, Councillor, if you could unmute yourself and raise your question, please. But while we're waiting for Johnny to come on stream, I note that Sive O'Neill has asked 2 questions, one of which is about Equinor, and I know from previous commentaries we won't be commenting, or you won't be commenting about another company, but you did ask about whether ESB would be divesting from fossil fuels arising from this initiative.
I'll field that one. We view that we're on a transition to net zero by 2050. There is a role for fossil fuels in that transition, specifically in gas as a transition fuel, and then evolving for when we can have sufficient offshore resources to develop sufficient hydrogen to displace that gas. So in the near term, our electricity system in Ireland needs those fossil generators, including ESBs.
Thank you for that. We'll go to Councillor Johnny Ryan, if that's okay now, please, Councillor. Or Johnny Flynn, apologies.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much. Brilliant presentation. I'm a civil engineer by profession, and I've been involved in the renewable energies and a voluntary, a commercial, which I'll declare an interest in, but also more recently in some policy development. I suppose the Midwest region has always been Ireland's energy centre. 100 years ago with Ardna Crusha, 50 years ago after the oil crisis, the ESB started planning for Moneypoint, and I think this is an extraordinary, exciting moment. 20 years ago, a group of us here in Clare set up a Clean Energy Action Network, and we looked at offshore wind, but cables, the damage to the cables coming in from the offshore fixed wind was a problem. We also looked at the idea of pumped hydro storage for storage of the renewable energy. This is very, very exciting. It's interesting, back in 1985, a Limerick company called WTI manufactured turbines and sold them into California. Unfortunately, that wind farm went into economic crisis and they didn't continue. I worked as a former chief fire officer in Limerick, and I visited Moneypoint. Brilliant project. I wish you really well with it. And I think that this is going to be a big game changer for the county and for, as Senator Roisin Garvey said, for the young people within the Midwest region if they get employment. Can I ask a question around the cables coming in? Are they going to be floating rather than on that severe seabed that was 20 years ago discounted as it discounted the use of a site off West Clare? And wish you well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, they will be seabed cables, and similar cables are in operation, across the North Sea and around the world, and are currently technically viable.
I see two questions. With your permission, Councillor, we'll move on from Joe Garahy, if that's okay. Joe, if you could again turn your mic on and your camera on, we will try and process the question, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can, yes, indeed. Thank you.
And thanks very much, everyone. I concur with my colleague Johnny Flynn there, and really welcome the announcement and welcome the exciting transformation that's possible with this. I'll be brief and just ask it from a very community perspective. In the West Clare Municipal District I'm chair of this year, we've been working on enabling communities to look at community-owned energy. And looking at grid capacity in that context, and maybe it's outside the scope of this, but number one, in terms of community benefit and community engagement, if you could speak a little bit on your plans there for the, I'll be local, the West Clare Municipal District and the county and neighbouring counties, and also in relation to the possibilities of community-owned energy and access to the grid in the region in context of this. Bearing in mind the RES scheme and the ring-fenced and the desire for community-owned energy having a part of it as well. But really, really welcome this. This is transformative, and as you're all aware, the West Clare Municipal District has suffered a lot of depopulation over the years. This potentially, I look forward to working with you, with Clare County Council, and engaging intensively on it. So thanks very much. Really exciting times.
Thanks for the comment. Just in relation to, there's three strands, if you like, to your question. In terms of community engagement, ESB has a history of community engagement. I think Sean said door to door, kitchen to kitchen. We will engage with people in the community around how we develop these plans. So that will start immediately on the offshore wind farm. This is what today is about. It's about community engagement, starting out our story and starting to talk to people. So we raise the discussion both locally and nationally in terms of the hub in general. So that's the first part. Community funding is a key part of offshore wind. It will be. So those terms and conditions, if you like, in terms of policy hasn't been yet set out, but I expect there will be a community fund related to offshore wind farms right across Ireland, and this one will be no different. In terms of the final details are yet to be organised, that's related to a broader scheme, as you referenced. And in terms of community equity involvement, I suppose there's a couple of points around that. I mean, that is something that is being discussed. These are multi-billion projects now, as nature, as I mentioned earlier. So that does, colour it to somewhat. We have another partner who is also a 50-50 partner, a second issue. And there's a third issue, I suppose, as this debate evolves, it is something we will engage in. And if it's appropriate in terms of the overall funding structures of this, it's certainly something, as I said, we can be constructive on.
I'm conscious we're running towards the end, ladies and gentlemen. I see Pat Dowling, the Chief Executive of Clare County Council, had a question. If he is ready to ask it, we'll happily facilitate it if he wants to come on stream. While we're waiting for that, I know Danny McCoy-Vibeck has noted that unlocking the potential is a truly apt for this big, bold initiative for the Irish economy. And his colleague Neil Walker agrees, saying that ensure that the rollout must be facilitated by the emerging of marine planning framework. So that's the comments that have come in. Pat, if you are there to turn on your camera and go on mute, we can take your question. If you have left there you are. If you want to go there, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. And I suppose it's not as much a question as an overall observation. I mean, I think we now, for the Shannon Estuary and Moneypoint, have a vision with a plan. And I think that is absolutely crucial. And I know it stretches a long period of time. But for the last number of years, a lot of the questioning has been based about what's the future. We now know there is a future. And I think it's a very exciting one. And I think that needs to be said here today. I mean, as you know, Clare County Council has led the strategic framework plan for the Shannon Estuary for the last number of years with many stakeholders involved. And I think this is a key starting point for that now and the exciting future development there. We do believe that we are the best, obviously, what else would we say, location for all types of innovation, and particularly in the context of renewable energy. Where else would you want to go in the country? So I'd like to say also that we have been engaging very closely with Sean Hegarty and his team at Moneypoint for the last number of years. And I only spoke to him this morning. And I think it's great that, we've collaborated very closely, both management teams. And I'd like to offer that continued collaboration. And in any way we can be of assistance going forward, we won't be found wanting. So really, for your own benefit in the ESB, there's going to be lots of questions, and I can hear them here today, lots of clarifications needed and sought. But I think for today, Cogardicus Gokenia.
Thank you very much. Just one or two other observations. Helen Downs, Chief Executive of Shannon Chamber, has made the point that it's a very exciting news for the county and region. And is this the start of a whole new industry? I think you've handled the second half of that question. And Violet Ann Wynne came through with a secondary question about community engagement, which I think you've addressed well at this stage. So without further ado, in the absence of any further questions, and noting that we are very happy to answer questions over the coming days, weeks, months, and frankly years on this, we might wrap up. And I might just ask Jim Dollard for his final words before we close the session down. So thank you for your interest, your time, and your involvement.
Thanks, Sean. So just to conclude, as we've hopefully set out today, Green Atlantic and Moneypoint is a really exciting vision for the country, for ESB. We're thrilled about this prospect. We're looking forward now to developing it out immediately, as I said, and out over the next decade. So a fantastic day, and we're delighted with it. I just want to, in final words, just to thank everybody here in Dogpatch Labs who helped us with this production this morning. And of course, everybody who tuned in today and gave us your questions. Thank you very much. And we hope to engage with you on this exciting project soon. Thanks a lot. Labs who helped us with this production this morning. And of course, everybody who tuned in today and gave us your questions. Thank you very much.